What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first ever Desmadre podcast, episode number 1. I'm super excited about this. But before we get going, just a very quick word about our sponsors, about how you might be able to help us keep this beast going, pay for electricity, pay for this camera, this studio. Our first sponsor is FanDuel. We're doing a promo with them right now. FanDuel is weekly sports fantasy league online. It's a lot of fun. You can talk shit, play with your friends. Makes football funner, even though it's already kind of fun. But we're doing something special this week where if you join FanDuel, put in $10 into an account, and use our promo code Desmadre, we will actually send you a free Desmadre.com t-shirt. Yes, free. We will carefully fold that beautifully, me or one of us, and put it into a nice little envelope and mail it to you for free. Go to FanDuel.com, enter promo code Desmadre, all caps, and then email us. Once you put in $10, because don't forget that, you got to put $10 in, email us your username to social@desmadre.com, and then we will send you a t-shirt to your home. It's going to be beautiful. If you don't want to deal with FanDuel, the next way you can support is just going to our store, desmadre.com/store, and buy a t-shirt directly from us. That's easy too. We have like a number of different t-shirts, a few caps, all the Masa and the Power stuff is like 50% off, practically giving it away. So go there now. The Masa and the Power stuff is selling out very quickly. Somebody just came, they just took off very quickly, as you could hear, because I don't know why. There's a train now. It's amazing, the community we live in here. The third way you can support us is through Patreon. Patreon is a way for you to become more intimately involved with Desmadre. I'm not going to tell you a lot about it, but basically it's like a ghetto Netflix where you can chip in $1, $3, whatever you want a month, and you get inside access to our community. And there's also some top secret prizes, like you could get your name in the credits of El Mundo, or you could get a personal shout out in El Mundo every month or something like that. It's really cool. But go check it out. If you're a hardcore fan, go to Patreon, patreon.com/Desmadre, and read more about it. Thank you very much, guys. We really appreciate your support, and we hope you enjoy our first podcast episode with Nate Olivares-Giles. All right, we're going to go and start Desmadre podcast number 1. The goal of the podcast is to try to bring in some folks that we meet along our path who are doing interesting things. We don't really care what you do, whether you're in music or the arts or journalism, as is the case with our first guest. But we just see there's kind of a need for a podcast like this. With our perspective, and we don't really want to say this is like a Latino podcast. It's just us, basically. Okay. Our perspective, if you will. We happen to be Latino, if that's what you want to call us.
Latinx, or
let's not go down that road.
Yeah. That could be a whole other episode.
Get the tequila out.
Yeah.
Let's explore our identities. So we just want to talk to cool people doing cool shit, and give an opportunity for people working on projects as well, to maybe have a little bit of a reach through the podcast, because there's power in that. Yep. Our first guest is Nathan Olivares. I'm gonna fuck your
Giles. Olivares-Giles.
Olivares-Giles.
Yeah. So Olivares is my mom. Giles is my dad.
All right.
Yeah.
So Nathan's a journalist and specifically covering tech these days.
Yeah, so I'm focused on consumer tech. So basically anything regular people use, not enterprise stuff. And I'm primarily a reporter, doing tech news, but I also do like maybe one review a week. I do some video stuff, usually like on camera about once a week, help oversee our social media, and then occasionally I'll pitch in and help edit stories and columnists and things like that. Yeah, so pretty, I'm like a little utility infielder, I just like a Swiss Army knife in the office.
Got it. Yeah. All right, we'll step back a little bit. Just so people who may be just listening on audio They think you might be like a 50-year-old guy who's been, because if you hear Wall Street Journal, you're like, oh, this guy must be old or something. I don't know. If you're just listening on it, you're not gonna see. So, when were you born? Where were you born? Maybe tell us about your parents, your background.
Yeah. So I was born in 1984. I'm 32, and I was born in Los Angeles actually. My mom was born in Montebello. My dad was born in Billings, Montana, but he moved around a lot because his dad was a Lutheran minister. But nonetheless, my dad really didn't grow up too religious. It's not his thing. But I was born in LA because my dad was trying to be an actor and a singer, and so my mom and my dad actually met in South Phoenix.
That's the hood.
That's the hood. That's the hood. That is the hood. Yeah, and my dad's white. My mom's Mexican American. My mom's actually Mexican, Mayan, and Yaqui. Yaqui's an indigenous group, Native American group in southern Arizona and Sonora. Literally, when they drew up that U.S.-Mexico border, they drew it like right in the middle of like Yaqui people and shit. But yeah, so my dad met my mom in South Phoenix. She was born in L.A. in Montebello, but grew up in South Phoenix. And,
what was your dad doing in South Phoenix?
He was being a poor preacher's kid, and he was working in a grocery store with my tío, with my uncle Danny, and that's how he met my mom. And she thought he was really weird, like, who's this tall white guy coming around? And he just kept asking her out, and eventually she said yes, I guess. But yeah, so it's crazy because my dad, growing up in South Phoenix, his Spanish is actually better than my mom's. My mom's Spanish was pretty good, but back when my tata was growing up in Globe, which is like a mining town in Arizona, the teachers would literally beat his ass for speaking Spanish and students. So when he was raising his kids, it was he was like, English is more important. So now my mom and my dad speak pretty good Spanish, and I'm super hella pocho, trying to get that back. But yeah, kind of interesting how that'll work.
The club.
Yeah. But yeah, so my mom and dad met there, and my dad wanted to be an actor and a singer, so he moved to LA and was working in some Ralph's grocery stores. And my mom and him got married. She moved out there. I was born, and shortly after I was born, they're just like, it's way too damn expensive out here. It's not gonna work out. So my dad gave up on his dream and moved to Phoenix, and so I pretty much grew up in Phoenix.
Nice.
Yeah, I moved around a lot.
Nice.
In Phoenix.
When did your interest in journalism begin?
Yeah, that actually fits into this growing up thing. So we moved around every like 3 or 4 years we'd move. So I lived in Levine, which is like at the time it was a farming community. Not so much anymore. We lived in
that's our mail.
There it is.
The mail just dropped.
In case you're wondering what that was. I lived in South Phoenix, West Phoenix, Tempe. My mom went to Arizona State University when I was in middle school, and then in high school. So let's see here. So my dad, worked in grocery stores. He eventually was able to get into the State Department of Transportation, and he helped on some civil engineering projects and worked there for a while. And they had this thing where they would basically pay for some of their employees to learn how to write code and do software development. And so my dad learned how to write some code. I think it was like C and C++ at the time. And my parents got divorced about the time when he was learning that stuff. So I was like in elementary school. So what that led to for my family was some genuine social mobility, I guess you could say. My mom went off to college, went to Arizona State, put herself through school, and then my dad became a computer programmer and was a freelancer or whatever. So he ended up starting a software company with another guy named Anir Ben Das, and they're still good friends and still work together. And what that led to was us getting out of the hood, basically. My dad got a nice house in like a middle-class suburb of Phoenix. It's still in South Phoenix, but it's on the other side of South Mountain. It's called Ahwatukee. So I've lived on both sides of South Mountain. But
where'd you go to high school?
Desert Vista High School, yeah, which is out there in Ahwatukee. So after growing up, basically mostly in the hood, mostly around brown and black kids and Native American kids, folks like myself. Suddenly I was in a predominantly white high school, which, you know, my dad's white, so I was used to white people, but it was still like a culture clash because, you know, it's I guess it's different when my dad's, you know, the white person in a Mexican, you know, carne asada or a family gathering or whatever it is. Yeah, so I, you know, high school, I moved to this like to Ahwatukee, and when people would ask where I was from, I would tell them, you know, oh, you know, I lived in South Phoenix, I lived in West Phoenix, I lived in Tempe, and basically people would just like shit on where I was from. They would just, you know, clown on it, you know, the ghetto and all that stuff, and that really pissed me off, to be honest. And there was this story in the Phoenix New Times, which is an alternative weekly out there, and it was written by this guy Chris Farnsworth, who now writes like a series of books about vampires in the Secret Service or something like that.
The perfect, just natural combination there.
Yeah, but at the time he was a journalist, and he was a crime reporter. He's a really good dude, and I talk to him on the internet every once in a while. I haven't actually met him in person, but he wrote this story called Crackdown. I guess it was the name of the headline, and it was about some police officers who were working West Phoenix, you know, where I lived for quite a while, and where I still go back to when I go back to Phoenix to see some of my family. And it was cool because this story talked about both like the good and the bad in West Phoenix, in Maryvale, where I used to live. And it specifically mentioned some police officers, you know, one who lost a partner, whose partner was killed, and they basically were trying to address gang violence by working with people in the community, you know, predominantly Latino community. So I saw this and I just thought it was super dope because it was both the good and the bad. And, you know, to that point, I'd always loved to tell stories. I'd always loved to read, and I was writing, but it was like drawing like little comics and throwing it out to my homies, or like trying to like freestyle, battle, rap and shit. And you know what I'm saying?
You had the rap phase?
Oh yeah. Oh man, I went through all the elements of hip hop, learning that I didn't do any of them quite as well as I would have liked. But you know, it was cool. I just saw that and I was like, I could do that. That's dope. So when I got into college, I started out at Mesa Community College, and I transferred to the University of Arizona in Tucson. I thought, well, you know, what do I want to study? You know, I'm good at math, and I like cars, and I like to draw. Maybe mechanical engineering, maybe get an auto design. I want to learn more about myself and my culture, so Mexican American Studies was there as well. And then I thought, well, you know, journalism sounds cool. I should give that a shot. I think I could do that, but I don't really need to study journalism to be a journalist, right? So I actually started out studying mechanical engineering. Then I switched to business. I had Mexican American Studies. And then I was living, I was basically like making like little hip hop zines, to partly to get into rap shows for free because I was hella broke, and also to just try journalism to see if I liked it and if I could, you know, write at all. And you know, my ego was pretty high, so I thought my shit was super fly, and I was like making like the best zines ever, but really nobody was reading them or anything like that. And I had to like basically there was like,
what was the name of your zine?
Well, I actually started out with this other guy's zine. It was called I think it was called The Soup or something like that.
What was that reference to? Or
you know what?
Soup.
I can't.
We fucking loved soup.
I can't even remember.
We just ate soup all the fucking time.
I can't even remember. It was this dude Andy who was a DJ down there. I can't even remember. And then yeah, so I basically started with him, and we would have to like reassemble crews like every couple of issues or something like that because nobody was like really about it the way that we were. And then I just like, you know, put out a couple zines myself. I just called them underground because it was like a predominantly underground, like no really big rappers were coming through at the time, but you'd have like lots of great folks like Immortal Technique came through and Brother Ali. So it was super cool. So yeah, I was doing that, and then I went and lived in Zacatecas for a summer in Jerez de Garcia Salinas with some family to try and improve my Spanish, and also just to like get to know Mexico a little bit better and have some fun. So I lived there for a summer. And my Spanish actually got pretty decent toward the end of the summer. I'm falling out of practice since then. But I was blogging about what I was doing. I had a blog, blogspot blog called Keeping a Gangster in the Motherland. And my mom and my girlfriend at the time were like the only ones reading it. But I was like writing it every day, and I was taking photos, and I was just like, this is what I love to do. This is what I'm doing for fun. Like, why am I fucking around with these other majors, you know, that I'm not as interested in, except for Mexican American Studies. I love that. But so I called the counselor, the journalism school counselor from there, and I was like, hey, I want to be a journalism major. This dude named Paul Johnson. And he was like, yeah, you have like way more math and science than you need. Like, it's not even a problem. So I started there, and that's how I got my start, I guess, officially in journalism. And then I, you know, applied and failed a couple times to get hired by my college newspaper. It took me a minute, but I eventually got in there, and that was the start of a trajectory or whatever, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. Did you ever struggle with, because I've always had an interest in journalism. Like, when I was in I'm older than you. I'm like 39. Well, I'm about to be 39.
Yeah.
When I was in middle school, I had like a subscription to Newsweek. Okay. I was like, I love like current events, which is one of the reasons why I think we do El Mundo. I've always just liked to keep up with politics and current events and stuff. And when I was in high school, and even going into college, you know, I thought maybe this was something. But one of the things I struggled with was that this kind of perception, or it's just me thinking, as a journalist, you're not a participant in what's actually happening. You're an observer.
Yeah.
Did you ever struggle with that, or?
Well, you know what? That's funny you bring that up, because as I was doing journalism in college, I was in working in my college paper. I was interning at this place, the Arizona Daily Star, covering crime, and I would have like one page that I would get to fill every Thursday about the south side of Tucson, which is also the hood. It's also predominantly Latino, and that was huge for me, and I really felt really good about the work I was doing. But I was also a member of MECHA, which is a Chicano student group that focuses on like immigrants' rights and basically just helping kids get into school and get into college. And in Arizona, growing up in Phoenix, when I left Phoenix, I had like a real love-hate relationship with it, because I was just getting fucked with by the cops basically since I was in middle school. And I felt a lot of kind of anger and just like super oppressed, and I just needed to get out of Phoenix. And so I was doing some activism stuff in college. A lot of it was centered around, getting people to vote. A lot of it was centered around getting kids, into college, and a lot of it was also trying to fight things like, SB 1070 and Papers, Please type laws, and
Joe Arpaio.
Yeah, there was some anti-Arpaio stuff at the time as well. And my mom actually took me to MECHA meetings when she was at Arizona State University. So when I was in middle school, I was going to MECHA meetings with her, and I actually helped start a chapter of MECHA in high school too. Basically getting together like what few brown folks there were, and one of the things I saw when I was doing the activism side stuff was that it was really easy for people to write us off, because it felt like to me they just saw us and they're like, well, there's just some angry Chicanos, or there's just MECHA or whatever. And I didn't think that was fair. I thought we had something to say and should be listened to. And on the other side, I just felt like what I liked about journalism, what I liked about this idea, and going back to that story in the New Times that I like so much, is just kind of looking at as many perspectives as possible. You can't ever really get the full story in just one article, or maybe even one journalist's career. But I like that idea of trying to get as many different perspectives inside as possible, and giving a voice to some of the people who disagree with you and maybe you think are wrong sometimes too. Now, I think oftentimes in journalism, I think you can look at some of the stuff that's happening right now with Trump running for president. Soledad O'Brien just called it out not too long ago. Basically, I think there's like such a desire to show balance that sometimes you give voice to people, who don't deserve one. That can happen too, right? Yeah. But that being white supremacists and shit like that, who are talking on CNN and feeling empowered and emboldened, which is terrifying in some respects. But I liked that idea, and so in a way, I do miss being a participant. in a lot of social movements I care about, in a lot of communities that I care about. But for what I'm trying to do, frankly put, I think there needs to be a balance, right? We need people in the streets. We need people who are organizing and protesting and doing the activist work, right? We need people who are in the mainstream, who are in the media and in the newsrooms. So just that when these things do get covered, they don't get covered from a really terrible and unfair perspective. And so
yeah, I think like the idea that I had about it was actually immature. Because really looking at the bigger picture, you are a participant, right, as a journalist. So to think like, I'd rather be participating as opposed to observing or whatever, and you really, in the bigger picture, the media is one of the pillars of the system, if you will.
Yeah, it should be, right? I mean, it's there to keep the powers that be at check to a certain extent, and it's there to, the way I see it is hopefully if I'm doing my job right, if we're doing our job right, then we're letting people know what's going on so they can make their own decisions. And hopefully if we're giving them the right information, they'll make the best decisions possible, right? So if we're leaving important parts of our own stories out, we're screwing ourselves. And when I say that I just mean like, Americans or whatever, right? So, there have been countless examples where Latinos are left out of that story. I'm not writing about Latinos on a daily basis now. I'm writing about, gadgets and apps and, virtual reality headsets and, privacy issues and recalls of phones and all sorts of stuff. But there's just too many of us. There's just too many Latinos in the country, too many people of color, to not be in newsrooms. Like, we need to be there. And even if you're in a position where you're not, covering your community directly, I think there needs to be more of us in there. So I think it's a balance, but yeah, I do miss that sometimes.
Yeah. Was there ever a time, it sounds like you had to make a decision at some point to be like, this is what I'm going to study, I'm going to major in. And certainly around that time, if it was like the early to mid 2000s, the rise of citizen journalism was accelerating, and certainly a lot of people were empowered to the point where maybe they thought a journalism degree was no longer necessary. What is it that really like made you decide to do this, to take that jump, and what do you see like in the industry? Like, how is the journalism degree valued?
You know what? I don't know, man. I mean, like, it was just what I enjoyed doing the most. And I felt like if I'm gonna, I think college is a wonderful thing. I'd like to see more people go, especially from my own family, especially from the Latino community. But there's no point in going if you're not going to get something out of it. Like, the piece of paper is important in some instances, but what's more important, I think, is what you get out of it, who you meet, and kind of you got to be selfish to a certain extent. So I was doing journalism. I was loving it. I wanted to devote myself to it and be serious about it. And so the best way for me to do that I knew how, was to surround myself with as many journalists as possible. And so being in the journalism department, almost every day, working in my college newspaper, getting internships, all that stuff, that's the only way I knew how to surround myself. It's like I want to be that. So how do I do that? I got to surround myself with those people, right? So when I was trying to freestyle rap and stuff like that in high school, I would hang out with my buddies who were doing that. You know what I'm saying? We get together to do that. When I was trying to play baseball, albeit ineffectively, I went and played catch every day. So you just got to surround yourself with the people who are doing what you want to do. So you don't need a journalism degree to be a journalist. You don't need a computer science degree to be a computer programmer. My dad just got a degree, I think, like 2 years ago. It was his first college degree, and he did it online. He didn't need it, but he wanted to do that, right? So I think in any instance, there are ways to get to where you want to in a non-traditional path. But since I was in college and I did want to do something, and I wanted to get something out of it, this was for me. And like I said, it took me a while to figure that out, right? I think in journalism, what's more important than anything is really where you've worked and the examples of work that you have to show that you're about it, right? Your body of work, yeah. So, I don't think most news organizations care if you have a degree in journalism or political science or anthropology or, basket weaving or whatever it is, right? But, what are the stories that you've told? What have you done? Where have you been, right? So I think those are more important. But for me, it was just surrounding myself with people who were doing what I want to do, and then just going and bugging the hell out of them and just being like, hey, like, you've been where I want to go. You've had a career. Like, how do I do this? Give me feedback. Here are my ideas. What am I not thinking about? Who have I not talked to that I should be talking to? Where should I pitch this idea? How do I get ahead here? Thinking everything from reporting to just how to craft a story and how do I tell a story for a mainstream audience and still maintaining like a sense of voice or whatever. These are all things I'm still working on to this day, and I'm like 8 years into my career, but that's just the way that's the only way I knew how to do it, that I could think of at the time anyways.
Sure. So coming out of University of Arizona, what was your first gig, or what's the path that led you to Wall Street?
I think I'm pretty lucky. There's this thing at the LA Times called MetPro, and it's a program that's created. There's not many like it in the country, but it's basically created to hire people. Well, originally it was to diversify the newsroom, to get more people of color, more women into the newsroom. And it was started a few decades ago. And it still does that, but I think now to a certain extent it's also about getting young people into the newsroom, and maybe it's become a little less focused on diversity as it used to be, but I think it's still a component. But basically there was this recruiter, his name was Randy Hagihara. I used to see him in LA at this journalism, the California Chicano News Media Association, CCNMA, had this journalism opportunities conference that they do once a year, and in LA. And some journalism professors at the U of A would get us together in a van, and we'd drive out there, and then we'd spend like a day talking to recruiters and showing them our stuff. So the first time I went, all I had was my like photographed hip hop zines. And so this dude Randy Hagihara from the LA Times, he was just like, this is terrible. Like, you don't look like you're serious about journalism at all. Like, what the hell is this, And I was like, this is gold, Like, this is great, What are you talking about? So he's like, if you're serious about it, go work at your college newspaper. So I applied a couple times to get hired at the Daily Wildcat. I didn't get hired. I thought about actually going and starting my own like super Chicano like newspaper. And I actually had like one of my early mentors tell me like, calm down, like work within the system. Like, you'll have time to start your own stuff later on if you want to do that. But at this point, it's more productive for you just to go work at the Wildcat. Sure. So eventually, I had a homie who was an editor there, and he eventually like convinced people like Nate's a good guy, like we should actually give him a shot. So I was like a reporter and a photo editor there and a cartoonist for a while too. And so then the next year I went back to LA and I saw Randy and I said, hey, Randy, you probably don't remember me, but I got clips, and look at here, these news stories I wrote.
I threw my zines away.
Yeah, basically, right?
I'm no longer militant. I've bought into the system, right? Randy.
And Randy's like, I don't remember you at all, but this looks good. You're a nice start. He's like, get an internship. So I was like, all right. So I went to all my professors, and I said, I need an internship. That's the next step. And I was blessed to get an internship at the Arizona Daily Star, and I was covering crime on Sunday and Monday nights. And then
what did that entail on a
it was cool.
Literally like on a physical daily basis? What did you have to do during that internship?
Well, on Sunday and Monday nights, basically, I would go into, at the time, it was the Tucson Police headquarters in downtown Tucson. They had a little office for the press. They called the Cop Shop, and it was basically like, I think there was like 4 desks in there, and there would be reporters from the Arizona Daily Star and reporters from Tucson Citizen, the two newspapers in town. And we would just sit in there and write crime stories, and it was super helpful because if we needed something, we could literally just like get up and go talk to a public information officer, basically the PR folks for the police department. Yeah. And then if we wanted to file public records requests, we can like hand them in person, all that stuff. And so that required me going to the Cop Shop, checking in with my editors, seeing what's going on, listening to, the police scanner, and then occasionally driving out to crime scenes, shootings, there was some car chases that ended in accidents and people died and things like that. And just kind of whatever would come up, right? So I was, the night cops reporter 2 nights a week. And that was actually awesome because, I feel like crime reporting to a certain extent is like a foundational thing for any other type of reporting you want to do, because you basically have to write concisely and quickly, and then you have to deal with, frankly, people who don't want to give you information. So even though we were in the Tucson Police Department, they didn't want to tell us anything, and they didn't want to share anything with us. So, early on, I think it was a good experience for me to deal with people who I had to push against in a respectful way. And then learn how to file like a public records request and basically like use the law to like get us access to information. But that was a blast, and that's also when I got to write those stories about the south side of Tucson. So on like Fridays, I'd go into a different bureau and work with editors on what my stories would be. I basically had like 2 stories to fill that page every day, every Thursday. So. Yeah, that's how that started.
Is there any piece that you were like particularly proud of from that first internship? Like,
there are a few. There were a few. There was actually there was this one guy. It's just funny. I mean, it's not even like an amazing story or anything, but it's just like a weird thing. There was this guy, I forget his name, but he would put this big like fake heart on his head, and he called himself Dr. Lubdub, and he dressed up like a doctor, and he'd go out to the Pasco Yaqui reservation, and he'd run with kids, and he would just get them to run. There's like a lot of obesity issues for youth in the country in general, but especially in Native communities. And he was just like this old dude who just really believed in this, and like he wasn't a doctor or anything like that, but he's like, I got to get these kids off their asses, and this is what I'm going to do. And to run in the Arizona sun, man, in like 110, 115 degree weather with a bunch of kids who have way more energy than any adult, wearing that big ass, it was like I think it was polyester and like cardboard and stuff. And the kids loved it. I mean, they were like in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade. He was just trying to get them started hella early. And they loved it, and it was super cool. And I went out there with a few days with them, and I just thought it was super cool for someone to give so much of themselves. They had popsicles and stuff, so the kids like wouldn't like pass out or whatever. And these kids were like trying to offer me popsicles, and I had to say no, because in journalism you're not really supposed to take anything for free. I mean, you can kind of take things for free if it's like free to everybody, sure. But in general you're not supposed to take free stuff. Like now when I review gadgets and stuff, we can take them on loan, but we have to send them back, and if companies don't want them, we have to donate them and stuff. But I was just like trying to be like super stringent on like my ethics and stuff. So I told these
no young man, I cannot have this popsicle.
Yeah, and they were so bummed out about it. They were so like, why can't you have the popsicle? And I was like, it's ethics. It's just so stupid. And then there was a story I wrote about some gluten-free cooking classes that a lady did. And what tripped me out about that was actually a story on the north side of Tucson. This woman was doing gluten-free because she had celiac disease. She actually had a genuine like medical reason to not take gluten, right? And so she had these gluten cooking classes. I wrote a story about it, and then I saw one of her friends, one of the people who was there at that class, a couple weeks later, because one of my homegirls was working. My friend Nicole, she was working at a grocery store. And I was in the back in Nicole's break room just chopping it up with her. And this lady came in, and she's like, "Oh, I recognize you." And I was like, "Yeah. How's it going? I wrote that story about your friend." She's like, "No, that's not it. That's not it." And she like swore that I was like one of the dudes who worked in her yard. And I just remember that just being like, this is the biggest bullshit. I mean, because listen, I'm a brown dude. I think you see me, you see a brown guy, but I don't think. I don't know. So I was just like, what? So I remember that. There were a couple things that stood out, but
did you save like your first clip, like that was your first like true like yeah.
You know what? I used to save all those things, man. I used to actually clip them out of the newspaper. Well, because at the time when you would want to get a job or an internship, you would actually take your little newspaper clips, then you'd photocopy them, and then you'd give a copy of that to people, and they'd actually look at your clips on paper. then eventually, sometimes people still do that, but now you pretty much send links. And so I used to keep all that stuff. I think there's a box full of some of them in my brother's house in Tempe, but I don't keep any of that stuff anymore. I basically have like PDFs and links of stories I'm proud of, and they're like, on a hard drive I haven't looked at in a few years. But no, I don't know if I have any of that. I think there's like a box of some of that stuff. But yeah, that was.
So you went from the internship there to
the LA Times. So I went back, and so I also helped start with my friend Victoria, a chapter of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists in college, and there's this thing that the NAHJ does called the Student Journalism Institute, and basically the New York Times works with NAHJ and the National Association of Black Journalists to put on what is a journalism boot camp like once a year. And the year after I started this chapter, they were doing the institute at the University of Arizona, my college. So some folks came by to kind of take a look at the campus, and I just like introduced myself, and I was like, hey, I'm one of the founders. I'm going to apply to this thing. Even if I don't get in, like I'm going to be hanging out. I'm going to be pressing my face against the window. I'll be sweeping floors, whatever it is. But there's no way the New York Times is coming to my school, and I'm not going to be around you guys, So luckily, I applied and I got in, and I think that boot camp was huge for me. There's this guy named Brent McDonald who was a videographer there, and all I'd done at that point was writing, and I wanted to do video too. And I just basically hung out with him like the whole week and just tried to absorb as much as I could, and he really put me through the paces and taught me a lot, and it was great. And so then I was about to graduate. I applied for I must apply for like 25, 30 different internships and jobs across the country. And I was feeling pretty high about myself. Like I had this really good internship at the Daily Star. I actually interned there for like a year and a half. I had like back-to-back internships. I did this New York Times Student Journalism Institute. I won a couple little awards in college or whatever. So my ego was pretty high. I felt pretty good. And then I didn't get any of those internships. I didn't get any of those jobs, man. I got nothing.
You were coming into probably one of the worst climates for journalism in the history of the press.
It was good though. It was a nice way to kind of humble myself a little bit and be like, all right, you're not as dope as you thought you were. Maybe calm it down there. But it was good, man. And so what ended up happening was, basically Brent put in a good word for me at the New York Times, and I got an internship at the New York Times shooting and editing video with them for a summer. So like of it's kind of crazy because of all the internships I could have applied to, like that would be the one I would want the most.
Right.
And I didn't think that would be the one I would get. And then after I got turned down from all these other ones, he's like, hey, if you're still interested, and he kind of saved my ass. And then I was talking to Randy Hagihara, that recruiter I saw in LA from the LA Times, and I like started emailing him like once a month for like the last 6 months before I graduated. And I just say, hey, here's a story I did. Here's this thing I read in the LA Times. Like, how'd you guys put that together? And just trying to make sure I was on his radar. Yeah. I told him I'm going to apply for this MET-Pro program. And if I don't get hired, that's cool. But I want it to be because I'm like not good enough, not because you don't know who I am. So he was all right with that. And as soon as I got that New York Times internship, I called him up and I was like, hey, I'm going to be interning at the New York Times. And I think that helped. I think they were really impressed by that. And so I did that for a summer, and then I started at the LA Times and MET-Pro that September of 2008. And then I was at the LA Times. I was a crime reporter. I was basically like a data journalist doing like investigative projects and putting together databases of public records. And then I was a business reporter, and that's how I got into tech reporting.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the LA Times was my first actual real job.
Got it. You mentioned earlier NAHJ.
Yeah.
And it's the National Association of Hispanic Journalists.
You got it.
What do you think the importance of that is? I know there's a little bit of there's some criticism this year from what's his name? Dude wears a bow tie.
Oh yeah.
Carson. No, what the fuck is his name?
Tucker something?
Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
Didn't he because I know at your national
convention
this year, Hillary went and spoke.
Yep.
And there was a little bit of criticism on behalf of some national journalists who said, what is the purpose of having this sort of organization? So maybe you can talk about that. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, well, we faced a couple. There was that criticism, and then there was also another criticism because, so the National Association of Hispanic Journalists and the National Association of Black Journalists put on a conference in Washington, D.C. and this year, and Hillary Clinton came and spoke, and there was some criticism because there was some applause during Clinton's speech, and then afterwards, some of our members from both organizations asked questions, and I was pretty proud of them because I thought they asked some pretty tough questions, which is pretty good. And she hadn't spoken to a room of journalists, to multiple journalists at once in more than 200 days. So I felt like that was a nice little streak to break as well. Yeah, you know what? I think if you just look at the diversity numbers in journalism, I think that answers why a group like the National Association of Hispanic Journalists needs to exist. So we've been around for about 31 years, and we've done lots of conferences. We've done lots of professional training, lots of scholarships. I think you can just look at me and my career. If NAHJ didn't exist and this New York Times Student Journalism Institute didn't exist, would I have gotten that job at the LA Times? I don't know. Would I have gotten that internship at the New York Times? Probably not. You know what I'm saying? Those things helped skyrocket my career. I wanted to stay and work at the Arizona Daily Star in Tucson, and they're like, we can't hire you. We don't have the money to hire you. And they wanted to, but they couldn't. And I got turned down from all those other opportunities, right? The only reason I got that New York Times internship was because I had someone I worked with who knew what I was about and knew my hustle and was willing to vouch for me. So I don't think my career would be what it is without NAHJ. Now, that being said, of all the good things I think NAHJ does and that we do, and I'm on the board of directors, so I am speaking from a position of some bias because obviously I believe in this thing, right? But of all the good stuff we do, and people like myself who might not be here otherwise without it, the number of Latinos in U.S. newsrooms overall has increased. I think it's like less than 5% in that 31-year period. Wow. So simply put, this change isn't going to happen if we don't push for it, right? We're not going to get more people of color in newsrooms if we don't push for it. And I mean like people of color. I think there are lots of white people who believe in diversity. And I think there are lots of white people who want to see more diverse newsrooms and want to see women and people of color and LGBT folks and folks from different diverse socioeconomic backgrounds and things like that. But you know what? We've had 31 years to see how that could change, and there's been lots of rhetoric and lots of talk and lots of news organizations saying that they believe in these things, and the changes are minuscule. They're laughably small. If we didn't exist and we weren't putting pressure on that to change, we might not even have what minuscule stuff we have.
What is the argument, the criticism against it exactly? Like, what is?
It's just like a why does there need to be an affinity group? Why do you? It's too exclusive. It's just for Latinos. It's not for anybody else. The fact of the matter is anybody can be a member, and we actually have had folks who are members of NAHJ and NABJ who got into the New York Times Student Journalism Institute who weren't black or Latino, who were white, who were Asian, and you know what? Like we're looking for those allies, right? If you are about more Latinos in newsrooms, be a member of NAHJ. We'd love to have you. If you're, I'm a member of NABJ. I'm a member of the Asian American Journalists Association. I'm also a member of the Native American Journalists Association. I'm part Yaqui. I'm part of all those groups because I believe in all of those folks and we're all trying to chase the same thing, So, the criticism's there. I think the criticism is bullshit. But I think it's BS that, when you look at diversity numbers and you hear companies say they believe in diversity, it doesn't exist. Now there have been a lot of newsrooms as well recently that have released some data that show that there are pay gaps between people in newsrooms that tie to gender and race. And this is currently happening at Dow Jones, which is the parent company of the Wall Street Journal as well. The union for reporters at Dow Jones put out some data, and I think it's something like 10, 20 years, the pay gaps persist. They're basically the same every year. The same thing I think happened at the Washington Post and some other newsrooms. Maybe things are systematic, maybe they're not. But when you look at the data and the gaps are the same year after year after year after year, or you look at the data on diversity of newsrooms, and it's barely moving an inch. I think it goes to show you that these changes aren't going to happen on their own. You gotta ask for them. You gotta push for them, and there's a way to do it respectfully, and so that nobody gets hurt in the process. But if we don't push for it, who the hell is, man?
Yeah, it seems to me that, and Sammy and I have talked about this, whether it's in entertainment or in tech, it's an issue across most industries. Yeah. Pretty much all industries.
Yeah. It's there. It's
an issue across all industries, I would say. And for me, I'm a member of NALIP. Mm-hmm. I'm not really an active member. Honestly, I've only been a member for a year. And I've been in college, I was a member of Mecha, and I've been involved in a lot of these groups, and I personally have a little bit of a sense of frustration with these groups, just because I feel like they sometimes tend to be just kind of social network gatherings and stuff like that, which is good. It's good to get to know everybody. But then I start to feel what's actually coming of this, right? And it sounds like you have a little bit of frustration because, you guys have existed for 31 years and there's only this much progress. Yeah. You're not totally to blame, obviously, but there's only, I feel like I've gotten to the point where I feel like there's only so much you can do from the outside. Yeah. And a lot of times these groups, just their existence, like we've talked about the controversy this year, can breed a little bit of pushback. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so I'm kind of you're working within a large organization, and I think that's where the power lies. Yeah. I feel like at the end of the day, you have to just be as good as you can yourself at whatever you're doing, and try to move up within these ranks.
Well, you know what? I think, like I said before, I think you need both, right? I think it goes back to the stuff we were talking about earlier.
But I'm just how do I spend my energy on a daily basis, or
I think that's the best question. Is I only have, when I wake up in the morning, I only have so much energy before I got to go to sleep, or before I die, or whatever the hell happens that day, right? Yeah. So given that I have only so much energy, what can I put it towards? So the things in the world that we can control are so small. Right. They're largely how we react to things, right? I can control how you feel about me. I can control whether you like me or not. I can control whether we agree on the same thing or not. But how we react to one another, we can control that, right? So if someone's coming at me in a positive way or a hostile way, how I react, that's basically the only control I have, right? So it's where do you want to put your energy? Right now I'm putting my energy as a tech reporter at the Wall Street Journal. I've learned a ton there. It's a beautiful place to be. I work with, brilliant colleagues. You're putting your energy towards Desmadre.com, right? So I'm working within the mainstream, a big traditional newsroom, and arguably you're on the outside, right? And you're an independent, thing. I think both of those things need to exist, and we need to be in both places, right? If we were just doing just the side stuff and just doing the independent stuff, and we had no representation in the mainstream, that would be a problem. And I think if we were just in the mainstream, but we had nothing of our own, that would also be a problem, right? So I think we need people like myself who are working for, the Rupert Murdochs of the world, and then I think we need some Latino Rupert Murdochs of the world. Now I mean Rupert Murdoch in the business sense, not necessarily the political sense, but I think we need those things. And you know what? I'd love to see that we could get to a point someday where there are enough Latinos who are at that level, where that we have some people who are Rupert Murdoch in the political sense, as well as the left leaning and the whatever. there's so many of us that we are mainstream, but we don't see ourselves as mainstream because we don't see ourselves on television. We don't see ourselves, in the bylines, whatever. And to a certain extent, I think our community sometimes, and not just us, but a lot of minority communities, we don't necessarily realize the power that we have together. And I think that ends up in us just basically being essentially just consumers of things rather than like mobilizing, right? So, I mean, just look at the presidential election. Like, no one's going to get elected without the Latino vote. Like, they keep saying that. They pretty much know that. And if we show up in full force, like, that'll definitely be the truth, right? But, how much do we actually believe that, and how much are we actually acting on that? And then how are we trying to use that? Are we actually pushing that and saying, you're not going to get elected without us, so here's what we want and here's what we need, right? And it's tough. I mean, it's Latinos are not one thing. They vary from the Bay Area to LA, much less from California to Arizona to Boricua in New York and Dominicana and Cubanos in Florida and all this stuff. So, but I think it's all about where you put your energy and what you want it to be, and I think we need people who are doing an independent route, and I think we need people who are working within organizations that exist and the power structures that be as well. You need both.
Yeah. What's been cool to me is as much as it sucks getting old, and seemingly becoming a little more irrelevant as you get older. What's really cool, I think, is seeing contemporaries in positions of power, and impacting change in a quiet way.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're younger, you think change comes from noise, from making noise, and you think you gotta raise hell or whatever.
Yeah. I had that moment. Sure.
So there's a tendency in that direction, but and it's not to say that this is just happening like now with our generation, but I think within every generation, when people get to that, it seems to me like it starts to happen when you're in your late 30s. Early 40s, when you start, if you're in a big organization and you start managing people, or you're in a position of power. I have several friends like that. My sister is on the Texas, State Board of Education. Yeah, she's one of 13 people in the state, and my wife works, I'm not going to say where she works, but she works within a large organization impacting very large changes with regards to HR and stuff. And so I hear these stories, or I see that happening, and then I see a lot of frustration from the outside, and I'm kind of more now I'm older, I'm just just chill. Yeah. Not that people, I don't say that because I think people always have to raise hell. For sure. But it's cool, and I think a lot of change ends up really happening when people not so much buy into the system, but you just say all right, I'm here. Yeah. I can use the system to make a much larger change than you might be able to make outside of it.
Well, yeah, one of the things we're trying to push for in NAHJ right now is not just getting people hired into newsrooms, but getting people into editing positions, getting people into management positions, getting people so that they can hire other folks, right? If we never make that leap, which traditionally we haven't historically in high numbers, then that's a huge problem, right? We need to be in those positions as well. So you're totally right. And that's a beautiful thing to see. I think I had a professor who said you have to go through Malcolm before you can get to Martin. So you got to go with any means necessary that burn shit down. Let's just start over before you can get to that. Okay, I'm gonna work with you. I'm gonna love you too, even though you're hating on me, and we're gonna do this together in a little more peaceful process, right? And I think that's probably true to a certain extent. But yeah, we need to be in those positions where we can actually have some power within organizations and make those decisions.
Yeah. What do you you're doing tech reporting now, and then what do you find satisfying about that? Do you want to continue to do that, or do you see yourself transitioning into something else? What's Nate 2 or 3 or 4.0? What I don't know where you are in your.
Honestly, what I love about tech reporting is it's kind of like remembering the stuff my dad did. My living room in high school being filled with dudes sitting at computers and building software, web-based apps at the time. I mean, they were like cloud before cloud was a thing, right? You know, I learned how to build websites and write code by hand, HTML and JavaScript, and at the time some active server pages, which nobody used anymore, ASPs, and a little bit of CSS. I did that through college a little bit as well, and I still dabble in that now. But you know, when I started out, it was just like, well, this is something I'm nerdy about and I like, and I'm a business reporter, and here's a niche I could find, right? But what I think it's getting to for me personally is tech is reaching a point of ubiquity that I think is often ignored by most tech journalists. And what I mean is tech is essentially everywhere, and it can impact your life in really beautiful or negative ways. And basically, if you don't have access to technology, it will hurt your social mobility. It'll hurt your educational attainment. It can, I think, increasingly is going to lead to class divisions. And I think if you have access to it, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be this for you, but it could be a tool of empowerment and a tool to lift people up out of poverty and to help them. And so I think, you know, looking at tech through that lens is important to me, and I'm not really doing much of that in my reporting today.
But it does come out sometimes, right? Like, I'm reminded of the Twitter harassment article that you wrote.
Yeah.
About how the guy who basically was like harassing Leslie Jones got banned, and
yeah,
we were talking earlier about how there's like a need to kind of check people like that do have this crazy influence.
Yep.
But then at the same time, do we really need to pay attention to just some random user with like 4 followers or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that mean?
These are real questions that are affecting people's lives, right? I mean, you know, one of the things that, and I spoke with some folks from Twitter, and I spoke with some folks from different universities who study these sorts of things, and you know, one of the things that, and Twitter's done a lot to improve their reporting of harassment. And
can you talk about that a little, just so?
Oh yeah. So basically, Leslie Jones was being harassed right after Ghostbusters came out on Twitter, and one of the people leading the wave of harassment towards her was a blogger for Breitbart News. He was actually a tech reporter / editor, right? You know, he was leading some harassment, and basically the wave of folks that he was championing were sending things that were claiming she was illiterate, were comparing her to apes and gorillas, really terrible sexist and racist and really ugly things. And yeah, in a somewhat unprecedented move for someone of that level of influence, because he's a very popular guy. Yeah. Twitter banned him for life, and that was a pretty big deal. So yeah, in the course of my reporting a story about this, about like, you know, what a problem this is for Twitter and what they're doing about it, and like I said, I think they're doing a lot. You know, one of the things I came across was a lot of people were saying that, well, there are all of these tools out there, and Twitter's doing everything it can. Twitter is still sometimes a really crappy place to be if you're a person of color or a woman, or especially if you're a celebrity of color who happens to be a woman. Like
your name
like
is Leslie Jones.
you know, I mean, goddamn, man, they you know, it's been brutal. It's been brutal. The people have been going after her, and I think it's sad and unfair. But yeah, these are things that are real life for a lot of folks. I mean, I don't know how it is for you guys, but I have friends on Instagram who aren't even celebrities. They're just pretty women, and the comments that they get sometimes are just like insane. You know what I'm saying? You know, there's lots of layers to this, but the fact of the matter is this is real life, and this is something that affects a lot of people. So I'm trying to like look for some of those kind of stories that
was really good.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Kind of look at that intersectionality of because you know what we're doing together online, whether we like it or not, is we are creating culture in real time, I think, and the stuff that we do, the conversations we have on social media and all that that we're having together. This is our intellectual space, as ugly and as ridiculous and dumb as it could be sometimes.
It's our
right?
town square. It's
it
our
is.
intellectual space. It's everything. Yeah.
It is, man. Yeah. You know, this is where we're learning together and creating some kind of discourse and some kind of world, and there are real world impacts on that too. So that's the kind of stuff I'd like to get into. You know, I still really believe in video. I love doing that kind of stuff. I'm really excited to see where virtual reality goes with journalism. In general, I just think there's a need for that type of coverage that looks at technology, not necessarily just as a business story, but really looks at it as like a lens to tell stories about how people live and the sort of laws that are being made and the sort of decisions that are taking place by the powers that be that affect all of us. That's something that I think about a lot. I also just think, like, in general, I'd like to see more sort of stuff, whether I'm a part of it or not, more news organizations that really kind of push themselves to think of new ways to tell stories. I mean, for the most part, a lot of stuff that's out there is essentially like the same kind of newspaper style paradigm, or the video sort of things that exist, are kind of variations on like what television journalism used to be.
Well, what do you think about just the BuzzFeedization of content and basically, listicles and, right now, basically, the BuzzFeed / AJ Plus sort of like 1 minute video text, so you don't have to have your headphones on.
Yeah. I think those specific 1 minute videos that are heavy in text, are an interesting and compelling style, because there are a lot of people who literally want to like look at something and they don't have headphones, they don't want to look on their phone. So it's smart. I think it's one of the few things that I've seen that really feels like, okay, throwing away everything else that we know about how to tell a story journalistically, if someone's just looking at their phone, what would they want to see and what would be compelling? So that makes sense to me. Now, it's not the future of all video and everything like that, and of journalism as a whole, but it's one idea that makes a ton of sense. Journalism's always been full of lots of different ideas. There have been, brief, like 1 paragraph stories. There have been like wire services that send out just headlines. There have been, short, medium, and long stories,
Sorry.
Yeah, all good. And there's always been, like newspaper stories versus magazine stories versus books that are nonfiction. To me, that's all journalism, right? There's been radio stories. Now there's podcasts. There's been television news. There's been documentary films. It's never been just one thing, right? So, but I don't think enough newsrooms are asking that question of, which I think this 1 minute video with the text kind of thing does ask, is if someone is just consuming news on their phone, what is it going to look like? And what do they want to read? And what do they want to see? A magazine style article, which I love and I would love to write a hell of a lot more of, someone's probably not going to thumb through that entire thing, on their phone while online for Starbucks. Maybe they'll do it on their couch when they're after the end of a long day.
Yeah, I mean, what I do, anytime I see a story like that, I just Instapaper it.
Yeah.
And then at night when I get in bed, I just open Instapaper and I read the longer form stuff.
Yeah.
There's no way I sit down and read something like that in the day, unless I'm doing like a public transit or something like that. But yeah, it's certainly been interesting watching that take shape, especially through Facebook.
Yeah.
Just because that seems to be the general aggregator for most people at this point.
For a lot of folks, it is.
It's a lot of Latinos, I think. Actually, it is.
I mean, if you look at, there's lots of data on this. I can't remember any numbers off the top of my head, but Latinos and people of color in general, we consume almost more on social media than any other groups. Yeah. Especially on Twitter and Facebook. Yeah. I mean, we're huge, and this is
Black Twitter.
Black Twitter's a thing, man.
Yeah.
Black Twitter is a thing. This goes back to kind of what we were talking about with voting. Is we are mainstream. We are huge. We have that power, and I don't think we always necessarily realize that or see that, right? And together collectively push for more things that tell our stories and that include us, right? I mean, just look at like the Fast and the Furious movies, man. Like every time those come out, like those are like the #1 movies, and it's just because people of color are going, and we love seeing, and we're included in those films. Whether you like them or not, like they have a hella diverse cast. You know what I'm saying? Like we show up for when we're included and when we're not, and I think given that we can push for more inclusion.
Yeah, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier. About trying to figure out a way to work like within the system or whatever that means. And it's interesting too to see, people that are kind of like kind of like hardcore like Chicano activists like online that can sometimes like are they pushing for like to start over from scratch, you know, which is I guess it is doable, but you're making it really hard. Whereas if you're actually trying to work within the system to make sure that the people at the top after a career's worth of time has the power to start hiring more people of color, make it more diverse. It just I always looking at the kind of reactionary stuff and how do you like incorporate it into something that's actually going to be like meaningful, like like in 50 years or
well, I think you know, I was a Mexican American Studies major at college, right? Mexican American Studies, Chicano Studies exists because people in the community push for that curriculum to be developed and be included in what is the mainstream, a university, right? The university didn't just come up and say, "Hey, do you wanna learn about yourself? This is great. There's so much, there's so much history and culture and literature and art, and man, y'all have done a lot." Like, actually, the reason why that had to exist is because if you just study history or if you just study American politics or whatever it is, they don't talk about us. You know what I'm saying? So we had to create that. So I think you can create that. Now, I think one of the important questions is given that there is a massive audience of Latinos and of Black people and of Asian people and all these different things, eventually there's going to be some sort of product to sell us, right? Fox News has Fox News Latino. You know what I'm saying? NBC had NBC Latino for a while. ABC and Univision got together and started Fusion, right? So these things exist. And they're going to exist because there's something to sell us, right? BET exists because there's an audience for it, right? So I think if we don't, the things are going to get created for us or not. So it's like, do we create it ourselves or do we create it within the mainstream under their umbrella? And I think there's different answers and there's different routes, but if this is something that we've been doing forever. I mean, you go to San Francisco, there's different like community newspapers in the Mission that cover the Mission and cover Latinos because the mainstream publications weren't. You go to LA, and there are community newspapers in East LA and Inglewood and South LA and that cover the Black community and cover the Latino community because the LA Times still doesn't cover it maybe as much as it should. No disrespect to the LA Times. I love it and I'm a proud alum and it's near and dear to my heart. But, I've never worked at a single place that I felt like has covered everything, maybe the way that it should, especially when it comes to communities of color. So, it's going to get created. So I'm down for the folks who just want to say, screw it, let's create our own shit. And I'm down for the people who, like myself, are right now inside of a mainstream organization and trying to be a part of the mainstream storytelling and like I said, I think there needs to be a little bit of both. I'd like to see more folks though, communities of color, women, LGBT communities, getting out there and starting more new media stuff. I'd like to see more stuff like Desmadre. I'd like to see more stuff like that. I mean, BuzzFeed's great. And BuzzFeed's actually killing it on like Latino coverage.
Hold on the motorcycle?
Yeah. BuzzFeed's actually covering it and killing it in their coverage of Latinos. And I think one of the best young political reporters in the country right now is a Latino guy, Adrian Carrasquillo, who's at BuzzFeed, and a friend of mine. But they're gonna do it either way. So it's just like at the end of the day, who's getting the richest off of this is to a certain extent. Is it going to be
not us?
It's not us. Yeah,
Not at the moment.
But the audience is there, and there's and the reason that these things exist is because there's money to be made behind them. Not to sound cynical and stuff like that. So
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I mean, very quickly, I think you learn very quickly if you try to start an endeavor like this that you can't do it for free just because it's so time intensive.
Well,
right?
I got bills to pay, you know what I'm saying?
No,
and so do
everybody's got bills
you,
to pay,
right?
yeah.
So it's like, I'm trying to get a living wage, and I think you can't have a business that doesn't make money. So I think there are ways to do all these things and accomplish all those goals.
I feel like a lot of let's just call it journalism online, on Facebook specifically, and Twitter, I guess. I feel like everything is being molded so that the message is as extreme or as like, oh my God, you've got to click on this, Yeah. And I don't know I don't think it is, though it's a lot more crazier because it's an election year, but I feel like it's been trending this way even before the election. And just purely because you want the most clickable, you want the most whatever, And BuzzFeed, I think, has a lot. I will blame it a lot on. I put a lot of the blame on something like BuzzFeed. Just and that's a lot of the A to B testing they done, because it is purely. There is no sense, like they do, like I've read about, they do the 25 captions, they test them, and whatever fucking works, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the robotization of that, if you want to call it that, and it tends to just be like the most crazy title or whatever, and I'm actually kind of really growing sick of it. Like I've unsubscribing from things because I'm like, even though sometimes it actually is interesting content, I'm just like, this is just fucking out of control.
Well, I think that's something that's been around for a long time too. Before it was BuzzFeed, it was the Huffington Post with that complaint. Before that, it was it was cable television news. It's like, does this really need to be breaking? And like the dramatic music every time Wolf Blitzer comes on screen or whatever, and not to mention like all the stuff that Fox News, and before that it was shock jock, radio guys
But that's entertainment.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people get their news there too, still, right?
Sure.
No, I mean, this is actually a good question. Like Matt Lauer just hosted this thing. Like, is he a journalist? Is he not? Like, I guess it depends on who you ask, right? But and before that, it was sensational headlines in newspapers. So it's an old complaint. I think BuzzFeed's just maybe the latest example because they're having the most success with it. I think what's important to remember with BuzzFeed is that they have a news arm and they have an entertainment arm. And a lot of times these listicles, not always, but a lot of times are the entertainment arm, right? But newspapers back in the day, what got me started reading newspapers at first was I wanted to read about sports and I wanted to read the comics.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So what's the difference between running a Garfield comic or having 25 gifs that show that Tinkerbell is the best of all the whatever Disney characters or whatever.
Because she is.
So I mean, and at the end of the day, for me, if those things help pay those bills for those working journalists, then I'm interested in that. Now that being said, hell yeah, it gets exhausting, and hell yeah, you're like, damn, I want to unsubscribe, and like, this is a joke, and no one's taking it seriously, and I think that's fair. I think that part of the reason why we feel that way is because we're being so inundated with all this BS all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like it's hard to escape it. It's like the only way to escape it is literally to not use Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and like there's so many videos on Snapchat that it's hard for me to find the videos my homies actually send because there's like a different Kardashian's ass at the top of Snapchat from the Daily Mail, like on a daily basis. You know what I'm saying? Like, what the hell?
You cannot not watch.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. So it's like, yeah, I think it's a fair complaint. It's a totally fair complaint. I think what I'd like to see is I think there are different new business models appear, right? So if you're trying to support a newsroom that has hundreds of journalists and you're putting out hundreds of stories a day, like the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal or BuzzFeed, then you have to reach as broad an audience as possible, right? Because those ads are what pay those bills and support that work. And if you can go to an advertiser and say, look at all these eyeballs I have, you should put your stuff in front of our audience. That's what that's about, right? Where if I'd like to see more stuff with like smaller, more engaged audiences, and some more like publications that are maybe a little more thoughtful and maybe a little more niche. And so I don't think we see enough of those right now. But I think one of the things we're learning is that clicks and page views don't necessarily mean loyalty, right?
Right.
And it's not a bad game, business model, whatever, for BuzzFeed or whatever. But, you know, I'd like to see more folks, you know, who are working on maybe quieter, more thoughtful coverage with more highly engaged audiences. And I think if you can develop a deeper relationship, I think you can build a successful media company on that sort of thing. And I don't really feel like I see a lot of that these days.
No, I don't think you do. Yeah. And well, I think
there's space for that.
I think individuals are doing it. And I think people are, like Dan Rather, for example, is now basically a fucking Facebook journalist.
Yeah, basically.
And it's amazing. Like, to see his stuff. It's very thoughtful.
Oh, yeah.
It's just his voice. And he's, you know, I don't know if he's, because he just started doing this like a few months ago, right?
Yeah,
he's like, holy shit, I'm 81. I could still be a journalist with my phone, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I think this is one of the most important things, you know, when we're talking about like the future media and like what's happened, all these things is, you know, back in the day to get something out, you had to have access to a television station, you know, you had to have a printing press. You know, the only people who could afford that sort of stuff were you know, rich folks, right? Nowadays, all the tools that I use to tell stories every day at the Wall Street Journal are largely available to anybody who has internet access. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we're sitting in a fucking garage right now.
Yeah, right? You know? Yeah. So that's huge. That's incredible. That's powerful. Now, the difference for a place like the Wall Street Journal versus someone who's on their own is we have hundreds, well, you know, more than 100 years worth of reputation and you know, to stand on and hopefully some credibility to maintain, right, going forward. You know, BuzzFeed has only been around like what, 12, 15 years, something like that.
I don't even think that long.
Maybe not that
10.
long. And so they don't have as long of a reputation, but they also are just getting to hopefully create something new, and that is free of a concept of like, this is what this is. This has, you know, more than 100 years worth of identity. This is what it is. And then here's this other place. It's like, well, let's figure it out, you know? Yeah. So I think there can be space somewhere kind of in the for these smaller things though that we're talking about that I think would be important. But the fact that everyone has access to the same tools essentially is pretty powerful.
From what we've been, the point we're getting at Desmadre is where, you know, I think initially we had a bigger vision for this of, you know, raising money, getting a lot of people to collaborate and to be contributors in this thing, and it was very difficult to raise money. Now, like Sammy was saying earlier when we were offline, you know, before we started the podcast, is that, you know, we're not like switching course, but we're realizing, okay, this is going to be smaller, but it's still very powerful.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more, you know, like, let's figure out who our like 1,000 loyal followers are. Yeah. And you can create a business out of that. It's still challenging. The challenging thing I would say to all of this, because the tech is not challenging. It all exists. It's all basically ubiquitous. It's all very low cost. Yep. The distribution is there. Yep. So the challenging part is monetizing. Yeah. 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 It's like, who's your sales team? Yep. And how do you really try to, you know, have like something steady out of your audience? Yeah. And whether that's a pay model or whether that's swag or whether that's advertising. Yep. You know, so advertising is really tough when you have a niche audience, because it's obviously you need, you know, millions of views or whatever to get anything worth it. Yeah. So I'd say like that's like the most challenging part of it, is figuring out how to monetize, because everything else is there and there's a ton of hobbyists who do it. Yeah. Yeah. Bloggers and podcasters or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. There's, I mean, you know, it's I guess I think it's ultimately a good problem to have, you know. Yeah. I mean, you know, look at like Chance the Rapper or Lil B or something like that, right? I mean, these guys, you know, had small niche audiences online, and they're giving their music away for free, and they make money off of touring. So it's like creating that audience and then finding some way to engage with them so that you can pay your bills and like make a living, right?
That's good examples, yeah.
You know, I mean, like, you know, not that long ago, those dudes would not have been able to have a career. It's like the only option would be to sign to a mainstream label, right? You know, now, you know, there's dudes like, you know, I mean, like, you know, look at Atmosphere or whatever, from Rhymesayers. They've been doing it forever, you know. Are those guys rich? Well, maybe not, but like, it seems like they're having a decent life and living comfortably, right? Yeah. Probably making a living wage, if not a little bit more, right? Yeah. You know, not everybody gets to be Jay-Z or Kanye West, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah. But being Chance the Rapper would be pretty fucking dope.
For sure, yeah. I wonder if there's a tendency for Latinos to more like easily kind of pounce on or criticize anyone that's trying to sort of like pimp out the culture, if you will. If there's like if there's like backlash more than there is with like, you know, someone like, I guess an extreme example like Taylor Swift, you know, she's kind of like this mega pop star. Who, I mean, you can argue, I guess she's appropriating a lot of things, but
Justin Bieber, Justin Timberlake.
But when you see someone in your own community trying to do that with like the culture that, you know, that everyone can relate to, are people like, no, you can't do that, that's whack, I'm not going to support you?
Well, we've been pimped out and dragged through the mud so much that it's like, I think it's fair to feel protective, you know what I'm saying, to a certain extent.
Sure.
You know, when before, like, our biggest, you know, cultural icons, you know, in mainstream, you know, were what, like
Eric Estrada,
you know, Edward James Olmos, who's like in everything, and then like Speedy Gonzalez or something like that. Like, what do you got? Right?
Well, now the age of the internet, the thing that works is anything cholo.
Yeah. You guys saw Cholo Fit. Everybody's talking about Cholo Fit right now.
Everybody's talking Cholo Fit, Cholos Try, Lil Moco. You know, what is his cholo called? Whatever.
But you know, I think it's okay to be protective of culture, to maintain that culture. I think it's important to recognize that culture is fluid and doesn't stay the same forever. But it's ours, and I think we can have some say, and I think it's okay to criticize. You know, I don't think not all criticism is necessarily bad. I mean, it means people are paying attention and care to a certain extent. And you know, I think it's important to maintain and to nurture and to protect the culture that you have, whatever that culture might be. You know what I'm saying? Because there are lots of examples of folks who assimilate to a mainstream idea and lose their culture in the process. I mean, just talk to, you know, there's a lot of white people who you ask them, like, what is your background? Like, they'll ask you all day, like, what's your background? Yeah. And where are you from? I'll be like, I'm from Phoenix, or I'm from LA, or I'm from where. No, where are you from? You know, and it's like, well, where are you from? They're like, oh, I'm white. It's like, well, you can't. Yeah, it's like, you know, wait, what kind of white though? Because like, white isn't even really a thing. There's like so many kind. You know what I'm saying? It's like, are you
pink, dog?
Yeah, you know. It's like, are you know? It's like, are you German? Are you Norwegian? Are you Scottish? Are you, you know? It's like French, or, you know, and you know, and like, there's beautiful history and culture that gets lost in assimilating too much, right? I think so. I think some assimilation, you know, to a mainstream idea like happens naturally, but I think it's important to protect the culture that you got too. So
I think we always talk about the sort of the hip hop kind of equivalent, or like the
hip hop, rock and roll, jazz, like every popular art form.
Right. Especially here in America, where it's it can just in terms of hip hop specifically, you know, it's been like 30 years, and it's like $1 billion industry now. Yep. Whereas it started off, you know, I guess.
I think you know? Like what he's getting at is that like we've our thesis, if you will, for Desmadre and for this sort of culture is that eventually it's going to have the power that hip-hop culture has, and white kids are going to be quoting shit in Spanish or in whatever bastardized pocho sort of shit that we end up at. And so there's not only like a cultural case study to be made of this, but also a business case to be made for it, because the numbers are certainly there to support it from a demographic standpoint, and the culture is rich enough that you know, people dig it, you know, and the challenging thing I think that Sammy is also pointing out is that, you know, once you start kind of playing in this space entertainment wise, or, you know, satire wise, like you get blowback from people who are just like, oh, how dare you do this or whatever. And our standpoint has always been like, nothing is sacred. We don't really give a fuck.
Well, if you're doing good comedy, like you kind of have to have that standpoint. Yeah. You kind of really do. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Louis C.K. regularly talks about like abortions and really fucked up shit with kids and things like that. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But he's tomorrow. You know? Yeah. You know, but he's hilarious. You know, I think that's right. I think it's a good thesis.
Yeah, it can be a little. I think it can be a little frustrating when you're actually in the dirt. Yeah. Because you deal with bullshit, like people saying stuff, and we're just like, just chill, like whatever, and like. You know, for us, like, that's also one of the reasons why, like, personally, like, you know, these big organizations, whether it's Nalip or whatever, I just don't even care, because you get a lot of that sort of feedback. Well, you know, I don't really want to represent my people like this. Like, I've had meetings with executives at not BuzzFeed, but similar places where we're pitching stuff, and they're like, we really don't want to represent Latinos like this. I'm like, you're not even Latino, motherfucker. Yeah. Like, and what does that even mean? Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so I like, you know, for better or worse, I like kind of playing like in our isolated garage here and doing whatever the fuck we want, because
there's some freedom to that, right? But you know, as you guys keep doing this, and if you find the success that I hope you guys do, and that I think you deserve, you're just gonna get more and more and more and more of those haters, man. Like, you're getting more and more of that stuff. I mean, to a certain extent, hopefully that means you're catching on and doing something well. But it's like, you know, I mean, like, look at God. There's so many examples. Like, you know, I guess recently, you know, Rodney Harrison, who's like this NFL analyst, was saying like Colin Kaepernick isn't black enough to be doing the protest he's doing. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah, that's a good example.
You know, there's so many examples of that.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot. You know, hey, Eric Estrada made it. You know what I'm saying? And you know, if he's a punchline to some people, you know what I'm saying, or you know, there's lots of people, you know, who it's like, did so and so sell out to get to where they are, and you know, you know, but you know, those are all things you're gonna have to live with if you're gonna be at a high level, and if you're gonna be somewhat of a public figure, and you know. What would be nice is if we have so much diversity and so many different representations of Latinos that no one can come to you and say, well, we don't want to represent Latinos like you're representing Latinos. It's like there's so many different representations of white culture, you know, whether it's like, you know, gangster movies and heist movies, you know, where all those people are white, or it's like, you know, the white teacher going into the hood and helping all the, like, you know, people of color, you know, Columbusing or whatever the fuck, you know, it's like, that those conversations of like, are we representing white people the right way? They don't happen that much, right? And that's because they're represented everywhere all the time, all day, right? But we have so few spaces that those conversations are fair. But I'd love to see it get to a point where there's so many different representations that it's harder to have that argument, right? Yeah. But we're super, super far away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know, what's it like for you guys? I mean, that's a lot of pressure. That's not easy to live with, you know? I mean, you guys are, you know,
C-grade internet celebs. D, maybe? Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't gotten out of control for sure. But yeah, it's funny. This is slightly off topic, but I think it's funny that we're kind of using the word like pocho freely. Yeah. Whereas, you know, people, like, that's like an insult to some people. You know, they don't like being called that because it literally means like dried fruit, you know, or rotten fruit. Yeah. Right, like that you're tainted somehow because you're not like totally pure, which I think is fucking hilarious. And I, you know, I like want to make fun of it, but it's like, it just this kind of similar kind of conversation of what's pure and if you're representing the culture properly, and there's all these rules or whatever. But I think ultimately, if you make good content and there's going to be something that someone relates to, whether it's like a character that's ultimately what's kind of what we're talking about here, at least in this space of entertainment, of creating stuff, is like people want to see characters that, whether it's like their uncle, their aunt, or someone that they know in their lives, that whether they like them or not, you know, those are the best characters, the ones that you fucking hate. But it's like those are missing, unfortunately, and they are. So
we're clearly not the first people that, like, you know, not that we've said that, but obviously like Lalo, you know, Alcarez and those guys. I mean, his whole fucking business, the whole website and everything is pocho.com, right? So it's something people have struggled with for a while.
For sure. And, you know, Border Town came out, that show that he worked on with Gustavo Arellano from the OC Weekly. I mean, those guys are amazing and hilarious. And you know, there were a lot of questions like, are they representing Latinos right? You know, are they selling out? You know, they worked on the show, but they didn't necessarily create it and it wasn't necessarily theirs. And, you know, and then it got canceled after one season. You know, they didn't have the support. I thought the show was pretty funny overall. You know what I'm saying? I really liked it. But, you know, you guys definitely aren't the first to face these questions, and you won't be the last. But it doesn't make it any less difficult because you're living with it on a daily basis, right? You know?
Exactly, yeah.
Like guilt, cry myself to.
But come on, like, guilt is part of being Latino. You know, you like,
No, I'm joking. I don't really give a shit. Like I said, like I'm just like, and again, for better or worse, I think, because part of me, like, you know, we should probably be trying to collaborate more, and we should probably be trying to network more, and all that sort of shit. But it just, for me, it's just, I'm like, I came from the background as an independent filmmaker, you know, and I had a short at Sundance, and then I had a feature that I wrote that I tried to get made, and I took meetings, and I did all that, and I was just like, this is fucking frustrating. People don't get it, you know. So I said, fuck it, let's start doing stuff online. And I think some people even were probably like, oh, what is he doing? He's like taking a step back, like he's wants to make internet videos now, like he should be working on a feature. And when I run into people, even though everyone knows I'm doing Desmadre now, like people are like, what happened with your feature? You know? And I'm like, motherfucker, like nobody wants to fund that, you know. I can't make it be made. Yeah, it's sitting right there, you know. The script is right there. It's good to go. You got some money, motherfucker? No, shut the fuck up there, you know. So, you know, you're always gonna get like, I don't know. I guess like the way I started the thread is just because like I think like doing the stuff online, and it just gives us more control. And aggregating an audience and eventually owning that audience is, I think, where the eventual power is. And it's a lot more work, obviously.
It is a lot more work, but I think it can pay off. I mean, you know, the Chance Rapper examples, Lil B examples, you know, what Frank Ocean recently did. You know, look at Robert Rodriguez, you know what I'm saying? Like he's been outside on his own, doing his own thing for a long time, right? And he's found his own niche, and he's super successful. And not everybody loves the stuff that he puts out or the way that but now he owns his own TV network with El Rey and all that stuff. Like,
I know very well.
Yeah, I mean there are ways to succeed on your own in an independent way. You know, I don't know. I think it's cool. I love what you guys are out there doing, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
All right, give us some more good thoughts, because we feel bad about ourselves. No, no. I was gonna say like we could just end talking about get back to journalism specifically and your space, and like what do you say to somebody who's young who wants to be a journalist? Like how I know you talked about your background, and I think that's probably the best thing you could that's the best sort of story, just hearing about what other people went through. But you know, somebody who wants to be a journalist now, like what are some resources? You know, just like quick advice for somebody who's looking to get into it in these days.
I mean, you know, the place where I try to start with folks is just that, you know, more people are reading the work that we do than ever before. The audience is bigger than it's ever been. There are more, and that's largely because of the internet, right? So there's always going to be an audience there. You're going to run into like a lot of jaded folks who say like, you know, newspapers are dying or journalism's dying or you know, it's changing and it's becoming like less serious and whatever. But I don't necessarily think that's true. I think there's what needs to change are the business models, and like I'd love it if it was us, you know, our generation who figures that out. It might be the generation after us, the generation after them who comes up with some new ways to sustain newsrooms and good journalism. But you know, the audience is huge, and I just think it's important to remember that, like, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is you want to do, there's an audience for that, and you can succeed in it. It's not going to be easy, you know. You got to hustle and grind, but it's there. And you know, it's just like anything. I think it's like you just gotta go out and do it. I mean, journalism is as much of a trade as anything else. You know what I'm saying, to a certain extent. And it's super subjective. You know, what's considered the right length for a story, or the right way to tell a story, or the right voice to write a story changes from publication to publication, and even inside of a news organization from editor to editor, right? You know, you just got to go out and do it.
For sure.
You know, I don't know if that's like even like a worthwhile thing to, you know, but you know, that's like that's just it. Like, you just got to go out and do it. You know what I'm saying? You can't like just like what you guys are doing. Like, you can't just like be like, well, nobody wants to make this feature, I guess I'm just gonna give up now. It's like, nah, it's like there's stories to be told. I have some ideas, there's some things I need to get out there, like, let's do it, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that was certainly the case. With me anyway, certain people would read the script. I love this. I hope you guys can make it. I don't have any money, but you know. And so you'd get really good feedback, creative feedback, but when the powers that be really financial powers, I mean, producers and backers and stuff. It's like I don't understand this, or I don't get it. So, cool, man. Where can people find you if they want to follow you on Twitter, or you wanted to plug NAHJ or anything like that? Yeah.
NAHJ is NAHJ.org. You can see the journalism I'm doing at WSJD.com or WSJ.com/tech, whatever. On all social media, I'm Nate OG. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's just whatever that website is /Nate OG. And that's where I'm at. So come find me.
Cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate you being guest number 1.
Yeah, it's an honor. Like I said, it can only go uphill from here. So way to set the bar low. It's gonna be really great. This is gonna be a even better podcast in the future. So I'm honored to be here, man.
We have a big it's not a huge list because we really just, I think if there's one common denominator here, it's like people who are smart and who are doing like cool shit. Like that's the barometer for bringing people in.
Right on. Trying to do cool shit. We'll see. Hopefully more cool shit in the future. So total honor to be here.
Appreciate it. Let's go get some lunch.
Let's do it.